Cinderella stories are often rags to riches stories. In folklore, they're known as rise stories, where a character rises beyond their initial standing. The peasant girl who becomes queen, or the peasant boy who becomes king. And we've been telling them for longer than you may realize. Cinderella is one of our oldest fairy tales. Some scholars believe 7,000 years old, as we'll see. Now, such an old story has quite a few different versions across cultures and times, and we're going to take a few lectures to see just how different these versions are and how differently they portray the heroine. In this lecture, we'll look at two different versions of Cinderella, one from France and one from Italy. And each of them has to do with the shoe fitting just right. These two have all the characteristics or motifs of classic Cinderella stories. The evil stepmother or mother, the unkind siblings, the good child who's made to wear rags, and the rise of fortune in the end. Cinderella stories open up possibilities for who we really are and can become. The fantasy of the Cinderella story matters to us because the deep work of imagining possibilities happens here. The story makes us ask, well, other people may think I'm dirt, but what if I'm really royalty? The way these motifs are articulated, it differs from culture to culture, as we will begin to see in this lecture through two versions of Cinderella from France and Italy. Let's begin by hearing the most classic version of all, Perrault's 1690s French rendition of Cinderella. Once upon a time, there was a man who chose for his second wife one of the haughtiest, meanest women in the world. The woman had 2 daughters who were just as wretched as the mother. But the man had a daughter of his own, and his daughter was as kind and as good as her own poor dead mother had been. And the stepmother and the stepsisters treated the girl horribly. The 2 stepsisters immediately took the nicest rooms in their house for their own, parquet floors, gilded mirrors, while the girl was forced to sleep on a straw mattress at the top room of the house in a garret. And when her work was done, she would sit exhausted among the ashes and the cinders of the fireplace. Her stepsisters called her Cindertail and Cinderella. But she didn't complain. And while she wore only rags, she looked 1,000 times lovelier than her stepsisters. One day, the king's son sent out an invitation to a ball, and all the people of quality were invited to attend. And the day the invitation came to Cinderella's house, the stepsisters, they were so excited. I'll wear my red velvet dress. Oh, I will wear my gold dress with my diamond necklace. And as the day for the ball drew near, as Cinderella did her sister's hair, the sisters asked, Cindertail, wouldn't you love to go to the ball? And then they laughed at her. Now, anyone else would have messed up their hair right there and then, but Cinderella was so kind and good-natured that she finished their hair and followed them with her eyes until they were down the road and out of sight headed to the ball, and then she began to cry. And right at that moment, who should show up but her own godmother? My dear, what is troubling you? My stepsisters say they have gone to the ball and But she couldn't finish. Oh, my dear, if you'll be good, I can enable you to go to the ball. Now, you go to the garden and you fetch me a pumpkin. Well, the girl didn't know what in the world her godmother wanted with a pumpkin at that time of day, but she did as she was told, and brought back the finest little pumpkin that she could find in the garden. And the godmother tapped her wand to the pumpkin, and poof, it changed into a gilded coach. Next, Cinderella's godmother sent her to find the mousetrap, and she went and found the mousetrap with 6 little white mice inside. One by one, Cinderella let them out, and poof, poof, poof. With each tap of the wand, a horse appeared where a mouse had been. I'll go find a rat for the coachman. And poof, she did. Now, Go to the garden and find me 6 lizards from behind the watering pot. Poof, poof. And they became 6 footmen who hung onto the back of the coach. Already, said the godmother. Oh, but am I to go in these clothes? They are so dirty. Oh, goodness, no. And at the tap of her wand, the godmother transformed Cinderella's rags into a beautiful dress of silver and gold, and gave her a little pair of glass slippers. Now don't forget, you must be home before the last stroke of midnight, the godmother warned her. And that's when everything would resume its ordinary appearance. Oh, I won't forget, Cinderella cried. And when she was still a ways off from the palace, the people told the king's son that there was a strange princess approaching from goodness knows where, and intrigued, the prince himself came out to meet the coach. Now, when he saw Cinderella, he gave her his hand, and he led her into the ballroom, and you could have heard a pin drop. All eyes were on her dress, her hair comb. The prince danced with her all night, and as the clock struck 1/4 till midnight, she excused herself and raced back home. And when her sisters came home, she yawned. She was feigning sleep, and she asked, how was the ball? Oh, the most beautiful princess was there. You should have seen her. The prince is having another ball again tomorrow. We will get to see her again. Well, perhaps I could borrow your yellow dress, and then I could see her too. And the girls laughed. You? I'd like to see that. Lend my gown to a dirty thing like you. And the stepsisters laughed their way out of the room and shut the door. And Cinderella, she laughed, and she smiled herself to sleep. And the next day, the stepsisters got ready for another ball. Cinderella waved goodbye. The godmother came. The pumpkin coach whisked her off, and she danced and danced with the prince. But she forgot to come home at 1/4 till midnight. And as midnight itself struck, she knew she was in trouble. She ran away. And along the way, what did she lose? One of her glass slippers. And what did the prince do? He sent out a proclamation the very next day. Whosoever's foot fitteth this shoe perfectly, that is the girl I will marry. And the prince came to the stepsister's house, and each sister tried on the shoe, but of course it did not fit. And at last, it was Cinderella's turn. Let me see if it will fit me. And the sisters laughed and laughed. They laughed as Cinderella sat down. They laughed as she stuck out her dirty foot, and oh my. They stopped laughing when the shoe fit perfectly into that little glass slipper. And their faces turned beet red when Cinderella produced the matching glass slipper and fit it onto her other foot. And at that very moment, the godmother arrived, and at the tap of her wand, Cinderella's clothes transformed into a gown more beautiful than the other 2 she'd worn at the 2 balls. The stepsisters threw themselves at Cinderella's feet and begged her to forgive them for the way they had treated her, and she did forgive them. And the day that she was married to her prince, Cinderella, who was as good-natured as she was beautiful, saw to it that each of her stepsisters married 2 great noblemen of the court. Now, this is the version that most of us would call the classic version of the story. It has all the motifs we mentioned that make it a Cinderella story. Evil stepmother, wicked sisters who get paid back at the end, a girl who goes from rags to riches. But you might be surprised to learn why these stories tend to have an evil stepmother. When we trace these stories back to the oldest oral traditional versions, there is often not a stepmother. It's the mother who's so mean to her daughter. Now, authors later introduced the idea of the stepmother instead of the mother, and the idea stuck. But either way, this parental figure is pretty gruesome. But remember, these stories are metaphors. The mother and the stepmother represent something. Bruno Bettelheim has noted, in real life, your mother, the woman who adores you, is also the woman who disciplines you. A young child has difficulty reconciling the two, so in Cinderella, the two aspects are split. The stepmother character, to get mad at when she doesn't seem to be very nice to us, and the hovering memory of the biological mother, to adore for her love and her nurturing of us. But you may be surprised to learn that the details of the story differ from culture to culture. For example, did you know that the glass slipper was purely an invention of Perrault's, the French writer of this version of the story? Many folklorists have speculated reasons why he chose a glass slipper. Some have speculated that Perrault never meant for the shoe to be glass, but that the French word for glass, verre, sounds and is spelled very similarly to the French word for squirrel fur, ver, and it was merely a confusion of the two words. So perhaps he really meant for his Cinderella to wear squirrel fur boots. Some have said that the glass slipper was merely an absurd joke, because anyone knows that if a glass slipper fell, it would shatter and break. But the glass slipper has remained the iconic footwear of this princess in rags. Why? Often the version that is passed on as classic is the version that matches best with the cultural values of the time. So, what is the significance or meaning of a glass slipper? Well, glass is beautiful and it's highly ornamental. It's also highly impractical. It would be very difficult to walk in or do any sort of real work while wearing it. And this would have reflected an important value of the upper-class French court. Those who had a lot of money and power didn't have to do hard labor, such as cooking and cleaning, and their clothes reflected their way of life. They could wear silks, which stain very easily, because they didn't do any activities that would stain or rip the clothes. They could wear frilly shoes, because their feet didn't have to trudge through the dirty streets often, and they could afford carriages. A glass slipper would have been alluring in French court because it reflected the value for women of that time to make themselves look as decorative as possible, and women themselves were seen as decorations in the French court. But the further back in time we go from this classic version, the messier Cinderella's shoes get. In Italy, in the 1620s, Giambattista Basile wrote The Tale of Tales. It's also called the Pentamerone, Penta for the 50 stories that are recorded in the collection. The book is a framed narrative, which means that within the story are other stories, little stories surrounded by a bigger story, kind of like how a frame surrounds a photo. When you first open Basile's book, you hear one story about a woman who pretends to be ill so she can be entertained by 5 other women, each of whom tells her one story a day for 10 days. 5 times 10 is 50. And on one of those days, one of the women tells this story. Once upon a time, there was a prince and a princess, and the prince and the princess had a little baby girl. Oh, and they loved that baby girl. The mother loved her little girl, but as soon as their girl, who they named Zezola, can you say her name with me? Zezola. As soon as Zezola had grown just old enough to remember the sight of her mother's face, her mother died. Oh, and the father, after some time, he married another woman. But this woman gave Zezola nasty looks. Well, Zezola's father, oh, he had eyes only for Zezola. He loved Zezola. He would kiss Zezola. Oh, and he would get Zezola everything that she wanted, including all the tutors and teachers who she could ever want, including a seamstress who taught her how to sew. She taught her how to do the hem stitch and how to do fringes. And this seamstress, this teacher's name was Carmosina. Can you say that name with me? Carmosina. Well, Zezola and Carmosina got along very well, unlike the woman who her father married, who would give her nasty looks. Oh, she would go to Carmosina. She would say, "Oh, Carmosina, if only you were my mamma. Oh, you would be so wonderful. You would give me smooches and kisses, not like that other woman whom my father married." And Carmosina, well, she would sew, and she would speak sweetly to Zezola. She would hug her, and she would give her smooches. Well, one day, Zezola went to Carmosina and said, "Carmosina, if only you were my mamma." And at that point, Carmosina began to stitch together a wicked plan. She said, "Oh, Zezola, wouldn't it be nice if I was your mamma? I will tell you how we can do it." And she told Zezola how she could get rid of that fiery, demonic woman. This is the way the story goes. That fiery, demonic woman who would give her nasty looks. And so Zezola, she listened to Carmosina, wonderful Carmosina, and she went. And when that fiery, demonic woman was coming after Zezola one day, and once the deed was done, and the time of mourning was over, Zezola, she went to her father. She said, Oh, Pap, don't you love a Carmosina? Don't you think Carmosina would make a wonderful mamma for me?" And her father, who had had eyes only for Zezola, he began to turn his eyes to Carmosina, and Carmosina turned her eyes to Zezola's father. And the wedding was beautiful. And at the wedding, when the prince, the father, and Carmosina were inside, Zezola, she was so happy. She went out into the garden. There was a wall, and she leaned up against that wall, and a little bird came flying down and perched on top of that wall. And she heard that little bird begin to whisper something into her ear. The little bird said, "Zezola, Zezola, if you ever should need anything, all you have to do is ask for the dove of the queen of the fairies of Sardinia, and she will help you." And the bird flew off. Well, Zezola, she was very happy. Now Carmosina was her mother, and she wondered why would the bird say that she needed help. Well, things were wonderful, just as Zezola thought they would be. Carmosina was now her mamma, and they were all very happy together for 6 days. And at the end of 6 days, on the 7th day, they were sitting down eating supper at the table, when all of a sudden there was a knock at the door. And Carmosina got up. It was Carmosina and the father and Zezola sitting there. Well, Carmosina, she got up, she walked over, she opened the door. And Carmosina's 6 other little daughters came walking in the door. Imperia, Calamita, Diamanti, Sciarella, Colombina, and Pascarella. And when Pascarella came in, with all the rest of the sisters, each of the sisters sat down at the table, and Pascarella went over right to where Zezola was sitting, and she, boop, knocked Zezola off of her own chair, sat down in her place, and started eating right off of her plate. Well, Zezola, sitting there on the floor, she looked over at her father, but her father by now, oh, he had eyes only for Carmosina. And Zezola was cast down into the kitchens. She was made to work in that castle. She began to be fed the scraps that they only used to feed to the cat. She was known as the cat Cinderella. And that went on for many weeks. And as time passed, the father came to love each of Carmosina's young daughters. And after a time, he found that he had business to do on the island of Sardinia. And so as he was preparing to leave, he asked each of his daughters, what did you want? What can I bring you? Everyone except Zezola. And each of the other daughters, Imperia, Calamita, Cinderella, Pascarella, all the rest, well, they said, oh, can you bring me a dress or a comb for my hair, rouge for my cheeks? They all wanted something. And then, almost as an afterthought, he turned to Zezola. What do you want? Well, Zezola remembered what the bird had told her. Remember? The bird had said, ask the queen of the fairies of Sardinia, and that's where he was going. She said, I do not want much of anything. Just ask the queen of the fairies of Sardinia. Whatever she would want to give me, that is what I would like. But you must remember to ask her. If you forget, may you not be able to move a forward or a backward. Well, and so told, he was off. And he went to Sardinia, and he did all the business he needed to do, and he picked up the dress and the rouge and the combs, all the things that the other 6 daughters wanted. But he forgot who? Zezola, and what she had asked for. And as he got back in the boat, the captain of that boat tried to set sail, but he couldn't. That boat couldn't move. It wouldn't go forward, it wouldn't go backward, and the captain of that boat, he was getting so tired. Eventually, he was exhausted. He went into his cabin and he fell asleep, and he had a dream. And in that dream, there was a beautiful woman who said, the prince who you are carrying has broken a promise to his own flesh and blood. You cannot move until he keeps his promise. And he woke up. And he went and he told the prince, and the prince was a little confused. But then he remembered what Zezola had asked for. And he got out of the boat and he went walking. And he walked down into the fairies' grotto, where the fairies lived. And he went down and he saw a beautiful woman, the most beautiful woman he had ever seen, and he knew that was the queen of the fairies. And the queen of the fairies handed out a special gift to him. Take it. It was a tree, a little date tree. And she gave 3 other gifts as well. She gave a golden pail and a little golden hoe and a little silken cloth. And she said, you take that to Zezola with my blessing. And he took all these things and he went back, set sail, the ship would sail again, it would move, and he came home, he gave the dresses and the rouge, and he took that tree and he just kind of tossed it over to Zezola. And Zezola, she took it. The tree was in a little pot, and so she set that pot down, and she took the golden pail, everybody take the golden pail, and she dipped it in water, and she watered the little date tree. And then she took that little golden hoe, everybody take your golden hoe, and she would weed that little date tree. And then she took the silken cloth, everybody take your silken cloth, and she would dry the dew off of that little date tree every day for 4 days. And by 4 days, that tree had grown to the size of a woman. And on the 4th day, a woman stepped out of that tree. And when Zezola saw the face of that woman who came out of the tree, it was as if she recognized that face as someone who had loved her long, long ago. And the woman said, Zezola, Zezola, my daughter, what do you want? Oh, if only I could leave the house, just for a little while, without anyone else in the house knowing that I was gone. Zezola, all you must do is ask the date tree. Say, little date tree, little date tree. I have watered you with my golden pail. I have hoed you with my golden hoe. I have dried you with my silken cloth. Now, strip yourself and dress me. And when you are done, tell the date tree, little date tree, little date tree, I have watered you with my golden pail. I have hoed you with my golden hoe. I have dried you with my silken cloth. Now, strip me and dress yourself. You do that, and you will have what you need. And she melted back into the tree. Well, the very next day, there was an invitation from a neighboring kingdom for all of that household to come to a grand party, a ball. Oh, and all of the 6 sisters, Carmosina and the prince, were so excited. And Imperia, Calamita, Diamante, Cinderella, Colombina, and Pascarella, they all got dressed in their new dresses from Sardinia. Oh, and they got ready, and they all rode off, leaving Zazzola there behind. Well, Zazzola, where did she go? To the date tree. She went to the date tree. She said, little date tree, I have watered you with my golden pail. I have hoed you with my golden hoe. I have dried you with my silken. Now strip yourself and dress me. And at that moment, a beautiful dress came out of that tree. And out of that tree came a beautiful horse. Oh, and she put the dress on. She got onto the horse and she rode. Everybody ride. Off to the neighboring kingdom she came in, and she was the most beautiful woman there. And none of her 6 sisters even recognized her. And she danced with the prince. And before anyone else left, she got back on the horse and she rode. But as she started to ride away, the prince said, oh no, you go and get her. And he sent his page after her. He went running after her, but she reached into the pockets of her dress. But he reached in, and she pulled out coins, golden coins, and she threw those golden coins back at the page. Everybody throw them. Threw them back. Oh, and he picked up all those golden coins. He was so distracted, he didn't even follow her, and away she went. Little date tree, strip me and dress yourself. And sure enough, the dress went back into the tree. The horse went back into the tree. And she was as she was before. In came Imperia, Calamita, Diamante, Cinderella, all the rest. Oh, you would not believe it. There was a beautiful woman there. She danced with the prince all night. We are all invited again tomorrow, all except for you. Well, they all went to bed, but Zazzola, she went to bed with a smile on her face. And the next day, all the sisters got dressed up again. They left, waving and laughing at Zazzola. And Zazzola, where did she go to? The date tree. Yes, little date tree. I have watered you with my golden pail. I have hoed you with my golden. I have dried you with my silken. Now strip yourself and dress me. And as the story goes, an entire team of damsels came out of that tree. And some of them had oil, and they oiled her skin. Some of them had combs. They put a beautiful comb in her hair. They dressed her in a beautiful dress. Horses and a carriage came out, and she rode. Off to the palace, she danced with the prince. But before anyone left, she got back in that carriage. She started to ride off. No, you must send someone after her. No. And he sent another person of the castle to go, and he chased after her. But she reached into her pockets, and she pulled out the jewels that were hidden there. She cast them out. Oh, and that servant, he picked up all those jewels. Ready to get the jewels. You don't want to miss out. Get the jewels. He got all those jewels. Oh, and that distracted him. Away she went. The next day it was the same thing. Little date tree. I have watered you with my golden. I have hoed you with my golden. I have dried you with my silken. Now strip yourself and dress me. It was the same thing. She got dressed up and she went out. But as she was leaving, and as the servant was chasing her away, one of her cork overshoes, that in Italian are called chiagnellos. Can you say that with me? Chiagnellos. At this time in Italy, over your nice shoes, they would wear a cork. It was very fancy. A cork overshoe it was kind of like a galoshes, and they would wear them over their shoes to protect their nice, pretty shoes. But the cork overshoes were really very pretty. And one of her chiagnellos, it came off. Oh, and the page, he picked up the chiagnelli. Oh, and he took it back to the prince. And on she rode. Back home. Back home came everyone else, and the next day, the prince himself went. And he had that chiagnelli, and he was going around seeing who would fit that cork overshoe. And as soon as he came to Zazzola's house, as the story goes, that cork overshoe, as soon as he saw her face, the shoe whoosh, flew to her foot like a magnet. And they were married. And all of Karamosina's other daughters, everybody take your hands, had to bow to Zezola. And she, Zezola, and her prince lived happily forevermore. The end. In Basile's collection of stories, we find this version of the classic tale Cinderella. Again, there are some common motifs: the stepmother, the sisters, all 6 of them, the girl in rags, and the change of fortune in the end. And there are many references that make this version of the story Italian. Let's look at just a few of them. For instance, the fairy godmother lives on the Isle of Sardinia, which is an island just off the western coast of Italy. Sardinia is a mountainous island, but underneath these mountains lies a hidden world of underground caves right at the surface of the sea. And these caves are called grottos, and this is where the Queen of the Fairies in this story lives. Another Italian characteristic for this story is the shoe that gets lost. It's not made of glass, but of cork, a chiagnello. It's a special kind of courtly overshoe that well-to-do women wore to keep the mud off of their nice shoes. In other versions of Cinderella, the shoe is made of glass or fur, as in the Russian story. And the shoe sometimes is not a shoe at all, but a ring or some other object that the girl must fit into. Now, the point for the tale type is that there is some kind of proof of the girl's identity, some kind of match or perfect fit in which the girl wins the prize in the end. The girl gets her prince or her king. In other versions of the story, the sisters cut off their heels and their toes to try to fit into the shoe. And they and the stepmother are rewarded for their treachery by being chased and pecked by crows in the end. Now, the anxiety over being the one who fits the shoe is the crux of the whole rags to riches aspect of this tale type. The one whom no one would want to be, Cinderella, is suddenly the one whom everyone wants to be in the end, this sought-after belle of the ball. That Zezola's magical helper is a fairy spirit in a tree is significant to the time in which the story was recorded. The Romantic era was full of images of nature and the natural world, and of ghosts and phantoms. It's no coincidence that we find preserved in the printed versions of this story, and in others, images of nature and wood sprites coming to the aid of the heroine. Now, the kind of magic we see in fairy tales of the Romantic era work, as Maria Warner has said, like magnetism. She says it's like the pull of the tides because it reflects a vision of organic correspondences that developed in early modern society. So what is an organic correspondence? In the 15th century, a Swiss physician and alchemist named Paracelsus began to classify elemental beings by the element associated with them. His associations for them we still use today in contemporary storytelling, movies, television shows, theater, though some are probably more familiar to you than others. Gnomes were connected with the earth, sylphs were connected with the air, salamanders corresponded with fire, and undines were associated with water. Now, by the time we get to Basile's story from the early 1600s, this kind of naturalistic, organically connected, magnetic magic appears in the cat Cinderella as a shoe that flies to her foot like a magnet. So it's only natural that she would become the queen in the end. And it's also from this romantic sensibility that we get the idea of Cinderella talking with mice and birds and bunnies, because of this romantic sensibility of an uncanny connection between nature and humans. And it's these kinds of details that open up our imaginations to the uncanny possibilities that Cinderella presents. What if I could talk to animals? What if I could become a princess or a prince? What if I could transform my circumstances? The connection between Zezola and her little date tree guides us into versions of Cinderella stories. In the final Cinderella story, we'll come back to the strong sense in the cat Cinderella that all these magical helper fairies, the godmother, the spirit in the tree, are actually the spirit of Cinderella's own mother who died. Next, we'll talk about how the further back in time we go with Cinderella, the more the stories focus on relationships between family members and women, details which connect this story back thousands of years to a time when women were venerated, back 7,000 years to the Ice Ages.